Today, we're going to dive into a book from the Bible that's just packed with drama, incredible prophecies, and stories of faith that you'll see have a surprisingly modern message for every single one of us. Okay, just try to imagine this. Three men get thrown into a furnace that's so blazing hot, the guards who threw them in are instantly killed by the flames. But inside, the three men are just walking around, totally unharmed. Or picture this. You're at a huge royal party. All of a sudden, a hand just appears out of thin air and starts writing this cryptic, terrifying message on the palace wall. Yeah, that brought the party to a screeching halt.
And then there's this. An elderly man who's been set up by his enemies is tossed into a den full of hungry lions. The next morning, they open the den, and he walks out without a scratch on him. So, these are just a handful of the wild accounts from the book of Daniel. And I know, they sound like something from a completely different world, right? But believe me, their meaning is more relevant to our lives right now than you could ever imagine. So let's get into it and find out why this 2,600-year-old book really, really matters. We're going to break this down into 4 parts. We'll look at the strange paradox of our own times. Then we'll meet a young man named Daniel who was exiled in Babylon, see how his integrity was put to the test, and finally, we'll uncover the book's incredible message of prophecy and promise. All right, first things first. Let's talk about the world we live in, right here, right now. You know, we live in a really strange time, full of contradictions. I mean, think about it. We have walked on the moon and we build these incredible high-tech homes, but many of us are afraid to walk down our own streets at night. We've created the information age with all the world's knowledge at our fingertips, but we just can't seem to figure out how to live in peace with each other. It really boils down to this ancient observation: man has dominated man to his injury. This quote just nails a central theme in the book of Daniel, which is the consistent, repeated failure of human rulership. And that's exactly what makes this ancient book so relevant. It tackles a core problem that we are still struggling with every single day. So, let's jump back in time now to about 618 B.C.E. and meet the incredible person at the very heart of this story. This is Daniel. He and his 3 friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, were basically the best and the brightest young men from Jerusalem. Because they were so sharp, they were handpicked for a special 3-year re-education program deep inside the powerful Babylonian Empire. But let's be clear. This wasn't just about getting a good education. This was a systematic attempt to totally erase their identity, to strip them of their culture, their religion, and to separate them from their God, Jehovah. And it all started with one very sneaky step: changing their names. Now, check this out. Look at the shift in meaning here. Their original Hebrew names, like Daniel, meaning "my judge is God," all pointed back to the God of the Bible. But their new Babylonian names, like Belteshazzar, were all tied to the false gods of Babylon. So this was way more than just a name change. It was a psychological attack aimed right at the heart of their faith. And the pressure didn't stop with a new name and a new school. Oh no! It got into their daily lives, which led to the first big test of their integrity. So the king offers them his personal menu, the richest food, the finest wine, but Daniel determined in his heart he wasn't going to pollute himself. And this is so key. It wasn't just him being a picky eater. This was a matter of God's law. Eating that food would mean breaking clear commands about unclean animals, about not eating blood, and about staying away from anything connected to idol worship. Now, instead of making a big scene, Daniel did something incredibly wise. He respectfully went to the official in charge and proposed a simple 10-day test. He and his friends would just eat vegetables and drink water, while everyone else ate the king's rich food. And you know what? After just 10 days, the results were impossible to ignore. Daniel and his friends actually looked healthier than all the other youths. This was a huge win, but the real payoff? Well, that came at the end of their 3 years of training. When the 4 of them were finally brought before King Nebuchadnezzar for their, let's call it their final exam, the king found them to be 10 times better in wisdom and understanding than all of his own magic-practicing priests and conjurers in the entire kingdom. 10 times better. It's just a brilliant example of what happened when they stayed true to their beliefs, even on something that seemed pretty small. So this powerful, personal story of integrity is actually just the opening act. It's setting the stage for the book's much, much bigger purpose. Let's see how this one act of faithfulness snowballs into a prophetic message that stretches across thousands of years. And you have to realize Daniel wasn't just there for a little while. He served as a high-ranking official for about 70 years. He lived through the fall of Babylon and into the rise of the next world power. And through that entire incredible career, he was God's messenger, constantly highlighting that God is the real ruler over all of mankind. And this is what's so cool about the book of Daniel. It's woven together from two different threads. First, you have the narrative thread, the stories we've been talking about. These prove that God blesses and protects those who stay loyal to him. Then you have the prophetic thread, which builds our faith by revealing the future, showing the rise and fall of world powers centuries before it happens.
So when you weave those two threads together, you get one single, powerful message. The stories show us why we can trust God, and the prophecies show us what he's ultimately going to do: establish his own perfect, everlasting government that will fix all the problems that human governments never could.
So we start with a story about 4 young men who refuse to compromise their faith, and we end up with a promise that stretches all the way down to our time. It leaves us with a really important question to think about. What else does this prophecy say about the future? And what does it mean for us today?